Hey, does anyone know what the is going on with this country? Come to America. We've got cult of the billionaires, crypto little bros, Nazis, poor people, and the woke left. Even if some of them deny it, we're all emotional as fuck, and sometimes rightfully so. Before Trump came along, presidential debates were relatively cordial.
And congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your anniversary. I'm sure this was the most romantic place you could imagine.
Yeah, conservatives always had some terrible ideas, but they weren't so abrasive about it.
Because the question is, radical left. Will you shut up, man?
Then the people who deny being emotional tend to convey their political beliefs in terms of facts and logic.
I don't care about your feelings. Like, just be perfectly clear, I care nothing about your feelings.
You gotta hand it to them, though. These approaches are effective. Have you ever tried arguing with a Trump supporter? They're more stubborn than a billionaire refusing to pay taxes. My point here is that politics make us feel a lot of things. And speaking of feelings, I've been to an absurd amount of mental health programs. I've been learning skills from cognitive and dialectical therapy since I was 14. It's been such a huge part of my life that I find myself seeing everything through that lens, especially politics. I mean, think about it. You need good communication and conflict resolution skills in order to organize a large group of people. You need to practice empathy in order to help those people while finding ways to manage your own stress. We need to utilize some type of coping skills in order to engage in the political scene without falling apart. And one skill that has stuck with me for years is called the wise mind. Basically, you get this Venn diagram with reason on one side and emotion on the other. In the center is your wise mind, utilizing both sides and finding balance. And that's a little therapy lesson for you. First one's free. This begs the question, how does the wise mind apply to modern politics? And has anyone even achieved this in their movements? I don't know. The rest of this video is just this. Emotions are a tool, a means to an end. Let's take anger, for example. It's a great motivator. It fires people up, makes them rally behind a cause, pushes them into action. It's also a fantastic way to grab attention, or distract from the more important issues at hand. Then there's sadness. It punches you in the heart and sparks empathy. People see injustice, feel it deep in their bones, and think, I need to do something about this. But emotions like these are a double-edged sword. They can lead to incredible progress, or impulsive choices, risky moves, and sometimes getting targeted by hostile groups. When we concentrate that energy into something focused and deliberate, that's when things change. If we move without a plan or strategy, that's when we get stuck. And that's when movements spiral into fear-mongering and chaos. I think this one is the most obvious. I could be completely wrong, but I think everyone, even his supporters, will agree that he leans pretty heavy on emotion. But how he uses that emotion is based in perspective. I had a revelation as a kid when I realized that every cartoon villain acts the way that they do because they believe that they're in the right. They think they're solving a problem, be it direct or indirect. Trump's cult following is the exact same. They believe woke politics are destroying the country, so they want to protect their traditions. They believe migrants are taking their jobs, and that makes them fear that they'll lose their income. But when it comes to Trump himself, he wields that fear as a weapon, playing those emotions to his benefit. His rhetoric thrives on pathos, fear of the other, nostalgia for better days, and anger towards perceived enemies.
They are being released by the tens of thousands into our communities with no regard for the impact on public safety or resources.
But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland?
Sure,
are you
I'm
prepared
willing to do
specifically
that,
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing. You want to call them? What do you want to call them? Give me a name. Give me a
white
name.
Supremacists and
Who would
right
you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
At Joe Biden's certification of the vote, His fan base, believing that they were acting on behalf of Trump, stormed the Capitol, destroying property and severely injuring multiple people. Yet there's no punishment for Trump's behavior. He won't see a day in prison. I mean, he's president. Again. His fan base believes in him, and that's enough for them to follow his every word. And if you don't, you'll be rejected. His slogan in itself implies that no progress has been made and that we need to go backwards in terms of progressive ideals. But this leaves questions that have yet to be answered. Firstly, what era are we going back to? 1950? 1776? Personally, I'm happy with my indoor toilet and air fryer. Secondly, again, implies that we were ever a thriving, healthy country. I mean, let's just be honest here, we've always had serious problems. But every year, millions of people work their asses off trying to build progress. To say this country hasn't changed for the better over the past 100 years is a joke. Life is fucking hard for so many people right now, and it feels almost impossible to find hope. Almost. But not quite. Consider the Americans who were in situations almost identical to where we are today. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, fighting segregation and severe racism in the civil rights movement, risking their lives for justice and the end of segregation. Judy Heumann, a rolling warrior of the disability rights movement, who organized and brought together the disabled community like never before and led protests that resulted in the ADA in Section 504. There are countless others, all proof that we can and will fight back against this regime. We can't give up hope on the people based on the actions of a corrupt leadership. I probably don't even need to explain this one, but fuck you, I'm doing it anyway. Conservatives have a burning, seething hatred towards trans people. At the same time, they're downright obsessed. I don't know if you noticed, but they talk about them all the time. Whether it's calling in bomb threats on children's hospitals, or creating poorly edited movies dedicated to avoiding the answer to a question, trans panic has consumed them to an unhealthy extent. When trans people are mentioned in a political debate, in particular when it's not the topic at hand, it's almost like blowing a horn screaming, "I don't want to answer the question!" Sorry, Goblin. I didn't mean to wake you up. Trans people are rarely, if ever, talked about in a humanistic way. They're often scapegoats, with conservative pundits preaching about how they're taking everything away from the average person.
If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false...
This stupid smug little face. I fucking hate this guy. Look at how dumb he looks. God damn.
If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
Meanwhile, this heated argument is used as a distraction. Because if we're not talking about trans people, we're not talking about the actions of conservatives. So, let's take the recent hearing addressing Pete Hegseth's ability to perform his duties if he becomes Secretary of Defense. He was justifiably grilled on his previous actions that could disqualify him from the position by multiple politicians.
So are you saying that you would stand in the breach and push back if you were given an illegal order?
I start by saying I reject the premise that President
I
Trump will be
understand
giving
you've done your
any
genuflecting
illegal
to him,
orders
but
at all.
This isn't a hypothetical.
After taking a massive beating, a Republican senator, Tim Sheehy, asks the stupidest question to ask in this kind of hearing.
Pete, I'm actually going to ask you questions because I want to hear your answer. How many genders are there? Tough one.
Senator, there are two genders.
I know that well. I'm a Sheehy, so I'm on board.
Wait. Hold on. What were we just talking about? That was so unbelievably dumb that I can't remember what I just said. God God damn it, it worked! See, this is what I'm talking about. It seems pointless to bring up trans people when discussing the potential Secretary of Defense, but that's intentional. Focus on the group that everybody hates. Hone in on that anger so people feel more inclined to support you. I think the worst part of all of this is that their fears are unfounded. They've been debunked time and time again by scientists, researchers, psychiatrists, and more. Matt Walsh, the guy who made an entire documentary about trans people, thought there were millions of kids on puberty blockers in the US. Apparently he didn't do any research while making that film, because if he did, he would have known the numbers closer to 4,000. But still, these people can't get past the transgender bad mentality. They need someone to blame for their frustrations with the government, and trans people are the perfect scapegoat. Nonetheless, we know that trans people are a minority community. They're not a threat. If anything, they're a necessity. At the end of the day, we're talking about human beings with lives, personalities, relationships, jobs, dreams, aspirations, and you probably walked past like 5 different trans people today and had no idea. Their existence makes up an important part of America and should not be feared or erased, and we can't let the Trump administration attempt to. In America, 1 in 4 women will have an abortion by age 45. Over half of the population has been touched by this procedure in some way, even if it didn't happen to them. Reproductive care is something that we often take for granted, from IVF to birth control and regular screenings for HIV and STIs. But not all groups view these things in the same way. Both sides of the abortion debate use fear, anger, frustration, and despair as tools to push their movement forward in different ways, and when there's such a strong emotional attachment to your beliefs, it's almost impossible to have a productive conversation about policy. Let's look at pro-life first. Their position is based almost entirely in morality, believing that it's wrong to kill any human life, even if it's unborn. This often falls in line with pre-existing religious beliefs that support the message behind the pro-life movement. They feel that by performing an abortion, you are murdering a child, and that resonates with a lot of conservative women. They fear that society itself is devaluing human life, and that makes this debate far more emotionally charged. As for the pro-choice position, their position is a response to injustice. They feel fear over losing access to legal and safe abortions, contraception, and other reproductive healthcare services. They advocate against patriarchal control over women's bodies and systemic barriers that disproportionately affect marginalized communities. In short, compassion and respect for those who want or need the procedure. All of this can impact personal relationships, creating a us versus them dynamic that leaves us deeply divided. Communities can become battlegrounds with protests, counter-protests, and clinic confrontations with no end in sight. After the overturn of Roe v. Wade, a wave of hopelessness hit the pro-choice movement. With the erasure of such an important Supreme Court case, it's hard to feel like the country is making any progress at all. Abortion will always be a divisive issue. There's just so much personal involvement in the problem that people need a way to let their frustrations out, sometimes acting within the wise mind and sometimes not. Whether you know him as the #2 political streamer on Twitch, from his time on the Young Turks, or Ethan Klein's recent content nuke, you've probably heard the name Hasan Piker. Hasan is a far-left political streamer with a large audience, averaging about 28,000 viewers per stream. He's unobjectively emotional with intense passion for the causes that he believes in. Over the past few years, however, he's shifted from general fighting against conservatives to fighting against his own side. He often blows up on his chat in frustration or anger, but he also draws in an audience who feels as wronged and disillusioned as he does. His intense hatred for American imperialism, which is at times justified, has driven him to sympathize with groups or actions that are objectively, or substantially, harmful. From platforming a Houthi terrorist just to interview him about anime.
Does he know what One Piece is? Is it Luffy?
Yeah, he said he's been watching it since he was a kid.
No way! That's so fire. Oh my god. We think the Houthis, Ansar Allah, is doing what Luffy would do. You should tell me.
To making an unsuspecting friend watch terrorist propaganda on stream.
Streaming this?
Yeah. Yeah. They're flexing.
What? And they're coming in hot with guns.
Yeah, but you have to understand, this is a deterrent.
To advancing anti-Semitic rhetoric.
Hasan's chat had been calling me a Zionist, baby-killing genocider. Maybe it is unreasonable that I'm asking him to moderate his chat for a friend.
My criticisms of the Houthis' slogan do not factor in to what they are doing. Of course, it is anti-Semitic, but contextualizing it matters. Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, that is such Western-focused propaganda. Like, for a Palestinian to arrive at anti-Semitic opinions, okay, they don't need to read Mein Kampf.
He's done many things to damage the left, specifically the younger online political community who are just starting to develop their beliefs. Ethan Klein's content nuke was well-edited, adequately sourced, and included necessary context to discuss Hasan's behavior. Yet for some reason, Hasan refuses to watch it or acknowledge any criticism of him. He's so stubborn in believing that his take is the right take, that it inhibits him from engaging with valid critique that could help him in his future endeavors. And there are many, many critiques you can make about Hasan. Now that being said, he used to do a lot more in-depth and credible research. For example, he covered the Amazon Worker Union case in Alabama 3 years ago. He cited credible sources such as NPR, Jacobin, and The Intercept, and interviewed organizers within the union. He contextualized the union drive within a historical and economic framework, referencing anti-union tactics used by corporations and labor laws, extending his commentary past the surface of the issue. And this was great work, Hasan. This shows that you have the ability to do more for struggling communities outside of comparing yourself to incarcerated firefighters. So what the fuck happened? From an outside perspective, he seems to have a hard time looking past his emotions and bias to address conflicts rationally, or at least without blowing up. Emotional narratives, from heartbreaking personal stories to apocalyptic visions of societal collapse, have a clear purpose: to convince hearts and minds, provide greater context, and push people into action. But when politics become purely emotional, it risks abandoning logic, pragmatism, and long-term strategy. Movements can become reactionary instead of effective. Ah, my good friend Ben Shapiro. I knew you'd find your way into this conversation somehow. He's got a show on the Daily Wire, 7.23 million subscribers on YouTube, and a catchphrase.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
If you've gotten this far in the video, you already know how I feel about this perspective. It lacks humanity. Denying emotion is denying a fact of the situation in and of itself. Emotional narratives and personal experience are integral to the understanding of many societal conflicts, especially in the age of social media. Context is everything. Ask any streamer who's been clipped. To take things out of context, such as removing the emotional and social aspects of transgender existence and instead boiling it down to chromosomes and biological sex, means falling out of the wise mind. It's far less productive to pretend something doesn't exist than to address uncomfortable realities head-on. Okay, but what about when the data stands behind him? He cites statistics, right? There's a tactic in debate called cherry-picking evidence, and Benny Boy is baking a pie. By choosing his data selectively, ignoring the points that don't agree with his, he risks misrepresenting it completely. Wait, is it a risk if he's done it before? But this is all part of the plan. Ben's a debate bro at heart, and most of the time his intent is winning or owning the libs. With this approach, he pulls in everyone who agrees with him, making his own little echo chamber where he can feel correct. There isn't much formality or productivity turning discussion into a sport. Yes, there are arguments, but the goal is to come away with something positive, and Ben doesn't seem to care about that part. He just wants to win and, unsurprisingly, make his opponent feel bad. Huh, I guess he does care about feelings sometimes.
Do you agree with the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare?
The affordable.
And why do you prefer the Affordable Care Act over Obamacare?
I just don't agree with the whole Obamacare policy thing that's going on. I just don't agree with it.
The Affordable Care Act.
And why do you support that over Obamacare?
Do not like Obamacare. I don't like anything that has to be forced for everybody to buy.
So Obamacare is un-American?
I think it's kind of un-American to force people. What if they can't afford it? What if they want more coverage?
And the Affordable Care Act is American.
I think it's more American because it allows people to make their own choices on what they want and who they want to work with.
Do you believe that Obamacare will eventually lead to gun prohibition?
Yes.
And do you believe that an informed citizenry is essential to a democracy?
Yes.
Do you know that Obamacare and the Affordable Care Act are the same thing?
No, they're not. Thanks, you made me look stupid.
11 years ago, Jimmy Kimmel did a segment asking people on the street, do you support Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act? If you didn't know, those are two names for the same act, and overwhelmingly, people didn't know this, and they would choose ACA over Obamacare. As of 2015, less than 50% of Americans supported the Affordable Care Act, despite it resulting in an increased amount of Americans covered by insurance, decreased prescription drug costs, and eliminating many negative features of private insurance, creating barriers to healthcare. The positives of this act far outweigh the negatives, and it's hard to understand why anyone would oppose it in the first place. So what went wrong with the messaging here? Firstly, Republicans created many anti-ACA ads to sway their base against the Democratic Party.
Let's have a look.
They're also inherently opposed to government involvement in healthcare, despite supporting Medicaid for seniors, which does just that, but we'll just put that to the side for now. Second, Republicans have been outspoken about their disdain for Barack Obama, protesting with blatant racism. They had a predisposed bias against the president, resulting in the negative association with anything concerning his name. This was going to happen regardless of what anyone did, but calling it the ACA tricked those same people into supporting a Democratic policy. I'm not saying it's right, but one tiny change converted those who wouldn't support it. What could have gone differently? We could have started with an appeal to emotion. Show stories of people whose lives who have been improved by the ACA, emphasizing their struggles that they experienced before access to healthcare. Next, we would use a little bit of reason. Educate the public in a way that makes supporters feel like they're not being spoken down to. Reduce the use of technical terms like individual mandate and health insurance exchanges into their layman meanings. I failed AP history. I don't know what those words mean, or even if I would have learned them in that class. And there are plenty of other ways this campaign could have improved their messaging, but I think you get the point. It's all about the wise mind. I think one of the best examples of leaning on reasoning in political messaging is the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically getting people to trust that the vaccine was safe and effective. We already established that the right are the champions of misinformation, and this event was no exception. They pushed their conspiracies hard. Even President Donald Trump took part in this, encouraging people to drink bleach as an alternative treatment.
Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out.
But the thing is, that's an overly emotional response. There's no reasoning, logic, or evidence. Even when Trump flipped his stance in support of the vaccine, he was booed by his own rally. They were so dead set on his first position that they wouldn't consider that he might be wrong. On the other hand, the left focused on ongoing scientific research, practical safety measures, and promoted the safety of the vaccine. Even saying that sentence feels cold and corporate, and I don't think it helps that a lot of the ads are animated in that sort of like stiff PowerPoint, Canva-esque style. If the ultimate goal is to convert anti-vaxxers and ensure as much of the country as possible is protected against a pandemic, that won't be enough. We only have one side of the wise mind. At the end of the day, most anti-vaxxers don't care about statistics. They care about how they feel, and their distrust of the vaccine extends further to a distrust of authority. But there is a percentage of that group who are just nervous or on the fence, and we need to be making sure that they don't fall into a spiral of misinformation. It's a matter of looking out for your neighbors and for your community. Patience in those conversations can be hard, but it ultimately leads to better outcomes for everyone. Taking the path of reason and logic while ignoring emotion is like releasing an unfinished product. It's bound to have flaws and make people angry. You lose connection with your audience. Necessary context is removed and facts can be twisted to fit a particular narrative. It's really hard to believe in something when you don't see a way that it can benefit you or the people that you care about. If we want to access our wise mind, we need to find some type of balance. But this is much easier said than done. In the present moment, there are so many intense political movements happening all at the same time, and to not feel unbridled rage, grief, and fear is a near impossible task. And that's why our leaders need to convey a sense of hope. Hope is what keeps us moving forward. It turns frustration into action and prevents a movement from falling into despair or fatalism. It guides the movement towards a clear path forward, a way of solving a collective problem for a brighter future. It's hard to see a way out if there's no light at the end of the tunnel. We don't need to suppress any of our emotions either. Righteous indignation, or justified anger at unfair treatment, is an extremely important feeling to use. It powers protests. It powers movements. It keeps the focus on the goal and directs anger towards systems of oppression rather than individuals. However, and this is super important, this needs to be paired with constructive action. Anger alone has led to destruction and steps backward in progress. When we focus ourselves on the real enemies and strategize on how to fight them effectively, we all stand stronger as a team. But most importantly, we need to have compassion and tolerance. Clear boundaries are an absolute necessity, but when we come across as cold and exclusive, people will be less likely to change their minds or feel welcome in the movement. You don't have to love everyone. The important thing is coming together, finding common ground, and accepting different lived experiences. We've got a lot of work to do to form a cohesive union, especially since most of the people who utilized the wise mind the most effectively were in generations before us. But like I said earlier, these people are proof that we have power and can fight back. If they could do it with far less information and tools than we have now, then there's no reason that we can't accomplish great things like they did. If this is the first time you're hearing the name Judy Heumann, I'm both happy you get to know her story and sad because it took you so long to hear about her. This could be a whole video in and of itself, but I'm hoping that you'll read more about Judy. I just finished her memoir, Rolling Warrior. It motivated me to help make this video, and I just highly recommend it. Anyway, back to the video. Judy contracted polio as an infant, and as a result, spent most of her life using a wheelchair. She faced barrier after barrier in just existing as a disabled person, even being labeled a fire hazard and being kicked out of elementary school. She found community at Camp Jeanette, where she spent most of her summers surrounded by other disabled people and not having to feel any shame in needing support.
What, you want me to tell them what happened? Well, 2 people got cramps and they're spreading. We were all very hyper about it. And I have to go shower some people. I'll see you later.
There she saw a vision of the future where we all had equal access to the world. The 504 sit-in was a protest in which Judy, some of her friends from camp, and hundreds of other disabled people took over the Health, Education, and Welfare building. The secretary of HEW tried to force them out by refusing meals or medication to be brought into the building, and without their usual supports, they really struggled. But they did find some really creative ways to keep each other going, like keeping medication cold by attaching a box to an air conditioner. This all lasted 28 long days, finally resulting in the Secretary of HEW signing both the Education of All Handicapped Children regulations and the Section 504 regulations. And only a few years later, she set her sights on the Americans with Disabilities Act, which would require the entire country to provide accommodations to disabled Americans. This meant sidewalk ramps, accessible buses, so much more that would allow the disabled community to participate in society with the rest of the world. As a way of pushing then-President George Bush into signing the act, hundreds of disabled people thrust themselves out of their mobility devices and onto the steps of the Capitol building, slowly crawling their way all the way to the top. It was a representation of all the barriers disabled people face in their daily life, even something as simple as a step. And there was one little girl, Jennifer Keelan, who was only 8 when she took part in the protest. She had cerebral palsy, and hours before attending the protest, she was kicked out of a restaurant with her family because the waitress told them, "Nobody wants to see you eat." Jennifer didn't let this ableism get to her, though. She began her crawl up the Capitol steps. Volunteers gathered around her offering support, but she denied. "I'll do it," she said, "even if it takes all night." Jennifer is still promoting accessibility and disability acceptance to this day, and I'll have a link to her work in the description. Judy Heumann persisted in asserting that she and all disabled people are humans who deserve to access every corner of the world. She wouldn't back down until she achieved her goals, keeping her community safe and touching the lives of millions of people. She used emotion to gain support for her cause and used her intelligence to organize a movement. Because of her, so many people can do things that they could never do before.
That every time you raise issues of separate but equal, the outrage of disabled individuals across this country is going to continue. It is going to be ignited. There will be more takeovers of buildings until finally maybe you begin to understand our position. We will no longer allow the government to oppress disabled individuals. We want the law enforced. We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
Judy Heumann passed in March of 2023, so about 2 years ago now, and she never stopped her activism. I can only hope that folks like me who are moved by her work will continue her legacy, especially right now. So, it seems that a lot of people have forgotten just how dog shit living as a black person in America used to be. I mean, it's still pretty dog shit, but now we have laws in place that are meant to protect them. At the moment, we learned a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King in my elementary and middle school curriculums growing up, but it was absolutely watered down for our age. It's kind of hard to tell a 10-year-old about lynchings, arson, murder, and severe trauma. As a result, we basically learned this. 1. Dr. King was the father of the civil rights movement. 2. Dr. King was nonviolent, and that was good because it's wrong to hurt people. 3. He had a dream for equality, which is good because it's wrong to hate others for being different. But I don't remember his name coming up much past the age of 13, and this is a problem. Without telling more important details of his legacy that are only appropriate for older audiences, we lose some really valuable insight on why his leadership was effective. Dr. King wasn't just nonviolent because it was right. He was nonviolent because direct attacks toward their oppressors would result in more pain and obstacles to accomplishing his goals. If you look at officers of the law attacking a crowd of people who aren't fighting back, it's hard to see that as anything other than wrong. They had less reason to demonize them, even if they would anyway. He had a dream for equality, and it's true that baseless hate is wrong. But this wasn't just about being treated equally. It was about an end to the mindset that leads to seeing another human being as an animal. It was a way of avenging the countless generations who suffered just so they could survive. It's so much deeper than just don't be mean. It's about unlearning and relearning, which is very difficult to do by yourself. The history of Black America is bloody and tragic. Countless people were arrested, brutalized, and killed in the fight for racial equality under the law. But it's also a story of resilience in the face of certain death. The fact that this community of people have withstood as much as they have is a miracle. And I think it's beautiful to see how they rose up to support other marginalized groups, even while suffering themselves. The Black Panthers played a vital role in the 504 sit-in, bringing meals and other necessities to the protesters inside. It just goes to show the power of allyship and the things that we can accomplish as a team, or as a family. Multiple groups rose up in opposition to the violence, and the ones that we remember the most are the ones who supported their communities, took a stand on behalf of others, and provided a clear path forward, giving others faith that change was truly possible. Emotions are essential and unavoidable, but they can't be the only tool we utilize. If we want to resolve anything in this country, if we want to avoid a civil war, we need to understand the impact of our thinking on our political positions. So the next time you feel angry, pained, or scared by an issue, just take a deep breath. Assess the facts, and try to access your wise mind. By cultivating balance, we can create movements that aren't just loud, but effective. This doesn't have to be a battle between feelings and logic, and it shouldn't be. We need to find a harmonious blend of both.